Today on CityCast DC, the head of DC's Hirshhorn Museum is leaving to take over the Guggenheim in New York. Ordinarily, that is something that might be looked at as like a normal career move. But at a moment when the Smithsonian museums are in the MAGA crosshairs, everything is a bit complicated. Journalist Kriston Capps is here to take us inside the departure of Melissa Chiu and to talk through what it means for arts in our city. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Kriston, welcome back.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. So Melissa Chiu, who's led the Hirshhorn for the last decade, is leaving to run the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And on paper, that looks like a promotion, right? That's one of the most famous museums in the world. But in 2026, nothing is ever just a normal move in the art world. Why was this move away from the Smithsonian a thing that drew your notice and lots of other people's?
Well, it's a big deal because it comes at a time when the Smithsonian is really, at a low point in its history. The institution's really been under the thumb of President Donald Trump in his second term. It also came as a surprise to people who really watched the Guggenheim closely. It wasn't clear that there was any kind of job open. So I would think it's fair to say that it took everyone by surprise, including staff at the Hirshhorn.
Again, the Guggenheim is a pretty attractive job, I have to imagine, if in the world of modern art. But is there any scuttlebutt that you've picked up about why she might have wanted out? Or was it just about being drawn to the new spot?
She has definitely said that she would have taken that job no matter what. And I kind of think that's right. If you have the opportunity to go lead the Guggenheim, you're going to take that. That's one of the most elite, recognizable museums in the world. And I can't imagine that the last few years were easy for Melissa Chiu, just like it's not been easy for any of the art directors within the Smithsonian.
I want to back up on her for a sec, because she's been a subject of strong feelings, not just during the Trump years and during the mishigas over who gets to call the shots at the Smithsonian, prior to that as well. What's her story? How long has she run the Hirshhorn, and what was her brief there?
Yeah, she had a rough start. When she came in 2015, I remember she posted on Twitter something like, "Let's go Nats," but then immediately announced she was holding a massive party in New York City, which DC residents did not...
Like a Hirshhorn-themed party, or like her own birthday party?
No, a massive Hirshhorn anniversary party where she was going to invite 40 contemporary artists to celebrate 40 years of the Hirshhorn. This wouldn't take place at the Hirshhorn. It would take place at 4 World Trade Center. DC residents, and especially, art lovers in this town who are very proud of this city and can be ruffled sometimes about attitudes from New Yorkers, didn't really take super kindly to this. I attended that party on an assignment, and, it was quite the thing. Like 40 contemporary artists. This was like walking through an art history textbook, like famous names, of artists I've, looked at forever, just kind of, meeting them over tapas. It was a shame that this couldn't happen in DC. That said, that was a big success and did set off a period of success, at least in certain terms, for the museum.
So the Hirshhorn is not like a lot of other Smithsonian museums in that it began as one person's collection, and it is a museum focused on modern art, on things that are, by definition, supposed to be envelope pushing and not necessarily super easily accessible. And we're in a moment of populism where that type of thing is viewed with some suspicion. She also has a pretty different background, I think, than a lot of the sorts of people who become directors of Smithsonian museums. Can you explain a little bit about sort of where she comes from personally and professionally?
The Hirshhorn, first of all, is like just the weirdest place. It was bestowed by this huge collection gift from a uranium miner who really, I think, wanted that museum to be built in Canada. But because of these various, it wound up in DC, and it's one of the few places on the National Mall that has someone's name on it. So it's, completely unique. Melissa Chiu, came to DC in a very roundabout way. She's from Australia. She's the first non-American director of the Hirshhorn. She has deeply studied Chinese art. She focused her career on contemporary art within the Chinese diaspora, I believe. And, it really had established this name in Sydney. So she was not really on people's radar when she arrived at the museum but at that time, Richard Koschelik, who was the director of the Hirshhorn, really was this big personality in American museums. And he'd, left the place in a terrible state in the sense that, the board was done with him. Everyone was really dissatisfied. They didn't have, the right curators in place. And so when she came, she really did kind of have tabula rasa because it was in such a situation when she arrived.
So I ask all this because now the job is open, and this is
Right.
It's not the Guggenheim, but it's a pretty prominent museum of modern art, and it is a beloved and rather weird thing on the DC landscape, and she needs to be replaced. So who does the replacing, and what are some of the kind of constraints on that, particularly given the moment in history we're at?
I mean, you just have to imagine that they're not going to rush to fill this position. We've already seen, that there's been little movement on appointing a permanent director for the National Portrait Gallery after Kim Soo-jae left, who had a direct conflict with Donald Trump. And, Lindsay Halligan, who's no longer, I guess, really active in the Virginia, where she was serving as U.S. Attorney in Virginia, now can resume, her assignment under Trump to continue reviewing the Smithsonian Institution materials.
Mm-hmm. So who does hire? I mean, is this a thing that the Smithsonian board, which is chaired by J.D. Vance, although not yet running with a majority of Trump appointees, is the board the one that offers her the job, or is it the secretary of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch, who is, again, there's rumors that the Trump people want him out?
I don't know who assigns, who hires right now. It would normally go through the undersecretaries. It would be a decision made by the board. It would be approved and effectively hired by Lonnie Bunch. But the Smithsonian is under scrutiny right now. And I think that any museum director who was named is going to, immediately come under the attention of various people within the Trump administration who want to put their thumb on this. So you have to imagine that there are people who are very qualified and might really want to take on a job like the Hirshhorn who just aren't going to come anywhere near it for at least the next few years.
Okay, the last weekend of April, the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian is hosting one of those events that remind you why we are so lucky to live in DC. The Living Earth Festival is happening at the museum Saturday and Sunday, April 25th and 26th. It is free. It's a celebration of native art, creativity, and the power of clay, built around Always Becoming, this breathtaking outdoor sculpture installation by Nora Naranjo Morse. There's going to be live performances, artist demos, hands-on activities, and more. And definitely make time for the Mitsitam Cafe inside the museum. If you haven't already eaten there yet, you are missing out on one of the most underrated and unique spots in this entire city. And for my money, the best food you can get at one of the Smithsonian museums. Again, it's free on Saturday and Sunday, April 25th and 26th. Check out the full schedule of activities at americanindian.si.edu or the museum's social media at Smithsonian NMAI. Did you know DC gets fewer than 30 truly window weather days a year? Days that are sunny, not too hot, and not too cold. Window Nation's The More You Buy, The More You Save sale is going on now, and it is the perfect time to make the most of every one of those precious days. You could save up to 50% off all the windows for your home. Window Nation's installation crews can finish the job in 1 day or less, so you can enjoy the breeze with minimal disruption. Best of all, they offer a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. But hurry, the sale ends soon. Schedule a fast free consultation now at windownation.com. A lot of the controversy around the Trump administration and Smithsonian museums and cultural institutions more broadly has been about discussions of American history, both things like slavery and discrimination, but also things like January 6th. The Hirshhorn, although it is, by definition, not sort of accessible to fans of tradition, it's not a history museum. Is there any programming there that has been the subject of controversy or that could be based on stuff you've seen?
No. The materials that the White House has produced in its various reviews have mostly focused on the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the National Portrait Gallery, where there is let's say some editorializing on history in some sense. I don't think any of that has happened at the Hirshhorn. And to step back, there's not a lot of evidence that the Trump administration has really done anything with the Smithsonian that, other than the pressure that they put on the National Portrait Gallery, the pressure that they've put on certain exhibits within the American History Museum. I just don't think that they have, tried to do the same things at, say, the African Art Museum or the Hirshhorn Museum. Now, they're, I think, being super cautious. There hasn't been new exhibits at the Hirshhorn in a few years. The stuff has been up, and there haven't been new curatorial staff appointments. So that's really the issue, is that no one's really taking any steps. It's very frozen, and I think it's just going to stay that way for a while.
So before I let you go, get to that question. I mean, you began by telling me this story about this, fancy envelope pushing curator comes in, Melissa Chiu, she throws a party in New York. Us provincial Washingtonians are offended by this because it's effectively saying we're a cow town and she can't throw a party here to celebrate our museum's anniversary. And now we are looking at this museum that is, I think, a treasure here. And what I hear you saying is that a lot of people aren't going to want to take it over, aren't going to want the job. There's been something of a drain of curatorial talent. They're not putting up new permanent exhibits. What does this say for those of us who live here and think the museums, including sort of weird modern art museums, are a wonderful part of our landscape?
Well, I want to step back and make sure to say that Melissa Chiu did a lot right by the Hirshhorn. At the time, the Board of Trustees was really hollowed out when she arrived. You'll remember the inflatable balloon pavilion they talked about installing in the middle of the museum back in 2012. But after that fight, she really added to the kind of core financial infrastructure. There's something like 30 trustees, more than 30, and they're located all around the globe. She internationalized the backing of the museum. She also brought Yayoi Kusama to the museum, which made it a huge traffic push. And
Trump does love a blockbuster.
He loves a blockbuster. There's a Dolcezza in the lobby now. There's some good things happening. So I think that the museum still has, that infrastructure in place and will be ready when a director is able to freely step in to take up the reins.
So she grows the trustees. One thing trustees do is give money, raise money, et cetera. How much, do you have any sense of whether if an institution is self-sustaining or is pulling in a lot of money on its own, independent from the taxpayer, does that insulate it more from some of the scrutiny that has really rankled a lot of people in the Smithsonian?
It should insulate it a lot. None of these museums are totally provided for by taxpayers. Taxpayers pay for, certain costs like the maintenance of the building, but the programming and stuff has to come through donors and supporters, just like at any other museum. And the Hirshhorn has really grown a collection. It's stepped up. It's much more international facing now. And I think that its reputation can hold. And it'll still be a really wonderful, beloved place for locals and visitors alike. I don't know if you've been recently, but you go now, and it's just night and day from the way it was 10 years ago. I mean, there's a ton of young people. It's full all the time. It's a place where people who are in their 20s, not just in their 60s, go to hang out. And that's something that not every museum can boast. Like the Guggenheim can take that for granted, but Melissa Chiu really brought that energy to the Hirshhorn.
I found out about her departure by looking at your social media, and you had posted a thing expressing your shock that the Washington Post, our newspaper, had not covered this. You'd found this out through the New York Times or other places. They've obviously had a lot of, obviously gone through traumatic rounds of cuts over there. But as somebody who watches, follows, and covers the art scene here, as people feel a lot of trepidation about what may happen, do you feel like there's a sufficient number of watchdogs in place to let us know if messed up stuff is happening?
No, it's a huge, huge problem. I mean, Zachary Small at the New York Times is a great reporter. I did find out through his news report that morning. I immediately texted Hirshhorn staffers I knew, and they all found out that same way. That story should have absolutely been in the Washington Post, and it would have been if they hadn't fired Jonathan Fisher, who was the arts editor. He's now at the Atlantic. The Washington Post retained it retained two, arts reporters, including one reporter specifically tasked with following the Smithsonian. But now both of those arts reporters are also at the Atlantic. So hopefully, between the New York Times, the Atlantic, your podcast, and other news sources, we can keep an eye on what's happening in this town. But I canceled my subscription when they cut all the sports reporters, and I'd cancel it again over the fact that they didn't report on the Hirshhorn.
While we're in the interregnum, there is still a museum there. What are you looking forward to there in the next couple months?
Well, one thing I didn't even mention is the biggest piece of Melissa Chiu's legacy is actually still to come, and that is the sculpture garden. They've done this massive renovation of the sculpture garden under Hiroshi Sugimoto, an artist, a photographer, and architect, fascinating guy. And they're completely redesigning it. And sculpture gardens can be, kind of dead places for art. They can sort of feel like cemeteries. There's lots of big metal stones stuff. But this one is supposed to be much more lively. They want to rotate pieces in and out. They want to have an area that's just carved off for performance art. They want to design it to better facilitate the parties that they like to throw. And I think it's going to be a real feature for DC. I've seen a sneak preview. I got to take a look at, it's still very much under construction. There are cranes and giant artworks being lifted in and out, which is kind of funny. I think it's going to be something that Washingtonians really love and incorporate into their, kind of summer schedules, their falls. And I'm really looking forward to it.
When does that open?
Don't know. It's on track to open later this year, but the shutdown affected that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see it pushed a little bit into 2027.
Does the Hirshhorn still do the summer jazz series and outdoor music and food and stuff?
Yeah, they're going to be doing a lot more of that kind of programming once this sculpture garden reopens. There'll be a lot more space for it. I think a lot more weird stuff too, which is kind of exciting.
Kriston, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we've got two new CityCast neighbors. Thank you, Amy C. and Jill K. We've also got some member shout-outs. Monique T. wants you to know Let's Talk Public Health hosts free mixers and meetups for public health students and professionals interested in networking and community. La Jambe in Union Market is Bob M's go-to for French wine, cheese, and joie de vivre. Matthew Y. loves Blue Jacket. The food always slaps, the beer is cold, it's open late, and it doesn't break the bank. Alan P. says Nido in Mount Pleasant has a Friday night wine tasting, and it is a great way to start the weekend. And Willie M. loves Yoga Heights for fostering an amazing yoga community. If you want to shout out your favorite business or nonprofit, become a neighbor. It's only $10 a month. Go to membership.citycast.fm. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.